custom logos and jerseys they've done, hockey sweaters, whatever, and it's cool looking stuff. It probably most of it looks better than the Minnesota Wild's logo. Am I allowed to say that on the air? I just said it on the air.
Please do.
Just check out sodastick.com. Yeah, saying they're not going to stick you with an amorphous varmint, and they're not going to stick you with a singular stupid nickname like Wild. You can do much better than the local NHL team by going to sodastick.com and designing your own stuff in conjunction with Landon and his team. They're working on some stuff for Talk North right now, and they're great. I can tell you they're great to work with. Sodastick.com. Remember, promo code YouBetcha to get free shipping on any size order, or if you're interested in the soccer stuff, use the promo code WonderWall to get 15% off. Good day to go to Twitter questions because we have a lot of good ones today. Some of them might be a little redundant here. Excuse me. Let's see. This is a slightly different twist on what we've been talking about. Wolves Brazil asks, what players or player types are the Wolves looking to acquire at the deadline?
Well, what they would need to balance their roster a little more, they need wing help. They need small forwards and shooting guards. Obviously, they need Covington back. But right now, what you're seeing with some of the lineups that Ryan is having to run out there, sometimes he's running out there a point guard and 4 power forwards, or 2 point guards and 3 power forwards, or 2 power forwards in the center. Like there's too many bigs that that are on, and so that not only hurts them offensively. Tolliver can space the floor. Šarić is starting to shoot better. When that happens, that can work. But defensively, they have a hard time. If you're asking Tolliver to guard threes, that's a lot for him to keep people in front of him, and so they are struggling to stay in front of their guys defensively. They're struggling to space the floor and hit open shots on the other end. And so what they need, which is what almost every team in the league needs, are those 2s and 3s that can knock down open threes. And I mean, one of the things that we're seeing right now is Karl Anthony Towns is drawing double team after double team, kicking it out to 3-point shooters, and they're not making shots. So if he was surrounded with Covington, if he was surrounded with other guys who can knock those down, it would change things immeasurably for them.
From Brett, really disappointing loss last night. If Ryan can't get these guys to focus and get up for a game like that, then where do we go from here in terms of coach, roster makeup, et cetera? A very mediocre team that keeps proving that over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the evaluation process of Ryan Saunders is how do they perform in these games? One of Glenn Taylor's biggest pet peeves with Tom Thibodeau, or biggest qualms, was that they lost games they should have won. Atlanta, Phoenix, a lot of these games that Glenn thought that they should have beaten inferior opponents, and they didn't. And so Ryan is in there hoping that you can win the games that you quote unquote should win. They have had a couple of these bad losses. They have been close. They've been tight games, but they've been bad losses. Now you're dealing with injuries and things, and that factors in. But, I mean, part of it is you're evaluating both Ryan and the job that he does game in and game out. And I really think when you look at kind of how shorthanded he is and the mixing and matching he's had to do, it's been his coaching has been fine. I think that,
and you've actually seen moments where he runs a great out-of-bound play. Or
yeah.
He has. I mean, you can tell he's prepared for this as an X's and O's coach.
Yes, yep, he's doing a good job, and certainly there are things that he's done that he should have that should be better. But when you put a 32-year-old coach in there, you got to figure that you're going to have some growing pains with that stuff. But what they have to ultimately look at is, what is the roster like now? And if the coaching change didn't light the fire, what is going to? And maybe there isn't a fire to be lit on some of these guys. That's the real question with Andrew Wiggins, with some of the point guard issues that they have been having with all. It's like, is this roster sufficient enough to compete? And so those are the two prongs that Glenn is going to be looking at when he evaluates both Scott Layden and Ryan Saunders the rest of the way. Is the coaching good enough to put us in positions to win? And B, do we have enough talent? Glenn, I think, believes that they have enough talent. So how much do the injuries factor in there? So there's all of those things that are that are going to factor into what he does and what kind of decision he makes for the long term once the season is over.
From Sports for the Soul, there was apparently a pennies on the dollar deal for Wiggins. Why didn't they take it?
Well, and that's, again, like, that's people not understanding what I wrote. Now, what I wrote was that the teams have called and checked in, and they're looking to fleece the Wolves. And there might be, like, there's been no concrete offer as well as written, but sort of like vulture circling and seeing if there's just a highway robbery type of a deal to be had there. So far, they've been told no, like there isn't that, and they've been kind of rebuffed on that. It's just been all very cursory conversations. Hey, that's what there's another question on Twitter now about can you take us through how deals get done? And how these things manifest themselves. How do people find out? How do other GMs find out who's available? Well, they ask. So they call up, and you're having questions, and you're having conversations about player X. And during those conversations, a GM may say, "Hey, what about Wiggins? What are you looking at there?" And that in some cases, a GM might say, "You know what? Make us an offer," or you know what? Yeah, we'd be open to that, or something, or something that of that factor. So far, there haven't been those types of reciprocations from the Wolves, but there are teams that look around and say, "Okay, Andrew Wiggins isn't working there. Let's just call up and see. Hey, would you take this terrible contract and this bag of bolts for Andrew?" And people now obviously say, take whatever you can get. Take whatever you can get.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. Like you can't do that. And so if you're going to trade one of your main pieces, it has to be a deal that will maybe help you with salary cap relief, maybe give you a little bit of talent that you can work with, and then help you rejigger going forward. And so first of all, there is no deal on the table that they could do right now and just say, yes, we'll take that and go, we'll just cut our losses. But secondly, when you're looking at a deal of that magnitude, a move of that magnitude, there's a lot of things that have to factor in to what you need and to how you can pull it off. And it's a lot of times when you're dealing with guys that make $25 million a year and more, you're going to take back a really bad contract too. So, what's the difference, I guess? That's the question. And so, while I know people got excited about that but it's just like there are a million conversations that happen every day, and it is notable that some teams are starting to call about him just because it's becoming clearer and clearer that it's not working here.
Right, and the question about the process came from Ryan Gleason. Good question, Ryan. Thank you. From Matthew Cryer, is Ryan Saunders the long-term answer for the head coaching situation? I know the family lineage makes for a great story, and Taylor's been known to stick with the country club when making hires, but should an exhaustive search be done this offseason? Before you answer, John, I think it's fascinating that as much as Glenn has been bashed for the country club and hiring people he knows and feels loyal to, and even though that hasn't always worked, he may have had better results with the country club than with going outside.
That's right. So, okay, first of all, we don't know if Ryan is the long-term answer yet. We're going to keep finding out about that over the next couple of months. I think that in his heart of hearts, I would guess that Glenn would like Ryan to be that guy. They have a great relationship. He believes in him. But I do think that I can tell you for sure that nothing's been decided yet, and that he will continue to evaluate this on a whole macro level. I think he will look at what other options are available as well, and then try and weigh them and see if he thinks anyone is better than the other than what Ryan brings to the table. Here's the thing with Glenn Taylor, and everyone's mad at him right now. And look, I get it. Like, the team is not in a great place right now. They went through this whole disastrous thing with Tibbs and Jimmy Butler, and so now they're kind of almost back to square one a little bit, and it's incredibly frustrating for fans. And then you say, well, what's the constant in this? It's Glenn Taylor. And that's true. But here, let's just go through really quickly, piece by piece, move by move here. what Glenn Taylor has done lately. Okay, David Kahn was a huge mistake. Getting to your point about going outside of the country club, David Kahn was an enormous mistake. Again, though, that was as much a Rob Moore decision as it was a Glenn Taylor decision. There was a lot of factors that were involved there. In the end, Glenn probably stuck with David Kahn too long, but yes, that was a disaster. So then he goes back into the country club with Flip. By and large, everyone thinks that was working, or at least was starting to work, and you could see things starting to come together. Flip died. Like, he died. And so is that Glenn Taylor's fault that Flip got cancer and died? I mean, from complications surrounding that? I mean, no. So then he goes out and gets Tom Thibodeau, who is a highly coveted coach.
He was the number one coach in the market.
Highly coveted coach. He probably made a mistake at the time giving him both president and coach duties, but that's what a lot of people wanted, was a no-nonsense guy to come in and hold these young guys accountable. It didn't work. Tom did not, as much as he told Glenn he had learned from his mistakes in Chicago, he didn't learn from them. And in 2.5 years, Glenn gave him 2.5 years to do that. He gave him all the rope he could, and Tom hung himself with it.
And I have to remind people, I was completely in favor of them hiring Tom Thibodeau at the time.
Right. And so then also, you trade Zach LaVine for Jimmy Butler, a move that a lot of people thought, yes, you have this chance to do it, go do it.
Again, I was in favor of that at the time.
Everyone's in favor of that. Not everyone, but most people were in favor of it. I mean, there were little red flags that you think about and say, okay, maybe this, maybe that might work out. Nobody thought it was going to turn into this big of a disaster. Nobody thought Jimmy Butler was going to totally erode things from inside and that Tom Thibodeau was going to let him do it. Like, so is that Glenn Taylor's fault? You know, I mean, look, I'm going to sound like an apologist here, but Glenn has certainly made his mistakes over the years, but just look at everything in context of when the moves were made and how popular at the time they were to be made, and it's hard to argue with a lot of them. And so, you know, yes, there have been some times where his loyalties have gone on too long, or yes, sometimes some of his family members maybe should not have been in decision-making roles, and he deserves absolute scrutiny for some of that stuff. But on some of the major moves in the last 5 years, they are ones that you could absolutely validate and ones that just did not work, and through very little fault of Glenn Taylor. And so, you know, I understand that he is the owner. The buck stops with him, and there have been mistakes that have been made. But to think that he's been just this bumbling, you know, lunatic is not, for me, it's not a fair assessment of how he's done things. That's just, to me, like, that's just the way that I see it. And, you know, yeah, I'm sure people will get after me about just saying, oh, you know, you have a good relationship with him, so you're defending him. I do have a good relationship with Glenn Taylor, but I also would absolutely call it out if I thought that these were mistakes that he should never have made. He made decisions, and they absolutely flamed out, and he's now addressing them. I mean, you know, everyone, you know, I get a little bit upset because everyone thought that Flip had this thing going in the right direction, and he died. Like, what are you going to do? Like, what can you do about that?
And he followed. Listen, I try not to talk or write much about Glenn because I technically work for him. I don't have a good relationship with him or a relationship with him, but I also don't want to suck up to him. So I feel like either praise or criticism coming from me doesn't really do me much good or do my paper much good. I will just say that I've been very critical of Glenn. I probably was harder on Glenn than anybody else I've ever covered for a long stretch of time. But this set of circumstances, he kind of did a lot of things I agreed with. It's hard for me to now go back and act like he just screwed up everything.
Yeah, I would say like in the period between like 2005 and
brutal.
Like, you know,
and that's when I started writing
11,
columns.
12.
I went from covering the Vikings and the Twins and MLB and NFL I came in at right after they went to the Western Conference Finals. And I'm like, this is going to be great. I'm going to get to cover a good NBA team. I love the NBA. And everything was horrible up until really, Flip came back and started turning things around.
Yep. And so there were a lot of mistakes that he made in that